Hey guys, so today I'm going to talk about environmental science and how this kind of fits into the functioning of this terrarium. So first of all, what is environmental science? Well, it is basically the way how nature works. Yeah. So when we consider our environment is our surroundings, um, and we rely on our environment in order to have a place to live, a place to eat, a place to socialize, and a place to, well, live, breed, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So if we split it into different categories, if we scale it right down to the bare rock of the earth that we live on, which is called the lithosphere. So the lithosphere is basically the physical, geological, so like the rocks, the natural minerals of the earth. Yeah. So imagine an onion. Yeah. So I'm just pretending that there's an onion in my hand now. So it's a round bulb, and it's an onion is made up of different layers of like skin, I suppose. Yeah. So if we peel off each skin, we get the different kind of. So if you imagine the central bulb of an onion as being the lithosphere, and then the other layers, so the next layer is like the greenery and the sort of what we call the biosphere. So the biosphere is like the living things, so like the insects, the plants, the animals, and so on. All the living organisms make up the biosphere. And then another layer of the onion could be the hydrosphere. So that's water. So like oceans, rivers, lakes, ponds, streams, rain coming from the clouds. That is all the biosphere. Yeah. And then, so we've got lithosphere, we've got biosphere, we have got stratosphere, which is the air, the atmosphere around us. Yeah. So the oxygen that we breathe in, the carbon dioxide that we breathe out, and then plants, obviously, to photosynthesize, take in the carbon dioxide and give off oxygen, which enables us to survive. So the stratosphere is kind of like the atmosphere, so like the air that surrounds the earth. Yeah. So I don't know whether an onion was a good example of trying to explain this. I just imagine an onion because you like peel off layers. So one layer is like the biosphere, one layer is the stratosphere, one layer is the hydrosphere, and all that. Yeah. So how does that link into this? Well, if we strip this right back to the bare, so if we take out all the plants, all the insects, all the kind of live bacteria, microorganisms that exist in this enclosure, even the gecko, if we take all of that out, we're left with just rocks, the background, the soil, and any kind of decaying leaf litter, logs and sticks and all that kind of stuff. So in this terrarium, that would be the lithosphere, the bare rock and the bare kind of, physical features. Then the next layer is the biosphere, which is the plants, the insects, the bacteria in the soil, the microorganisms, even the fungi. I've already said the plants, the leopard gecko himself, the crickets, the locusts, the mealworms, the sort of all kind of the insects that live in here. Yeah, that is the biosphere. And so the biosphere and I'll go into this in a sec. Then we have the hydrosphere, water. Now, there isn't a river running through this, or a stream, or anything like that, for obvious reasons, because it's a terrarium. We do have a drainage layer which will retain some moisture, and so that moisture is retained and it evaporates through the soil, which then what's the word? It produces gases, nitrogen, carbon, and releases more salts and minerals into the soil. So that is all to do with like the hydrosphere in this terrarium. And then the stratosphere is the air. Now, we have energy coming from the heat. Yeah. So that's kind of like the sun. So that produces hot air. Then we have cooler air from the room and generated from the fans, which kind of circulate air and draw out air. So that's kind of like acting as like a stratosphere. And so there we go. So stratosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, lithosphere. All of those elements combined work, they interlink, they work together. And if you imagine that on a grander scale in terms of life on Earth, all those elements need to work together in order for life on Earth to continue. And that, in a nutshell, is environmental science, how nature works. Yeah. So when we're thinking of how this terrarium works, the concepts of environmental science come into play quite a lot. Because, for instance, the heat from that bulb will provide wavelengths of energy which the reptile needs in order to function well and live well and all sorts, and survive, basically. The plants need the light from the stratosphere, so from like the lights, in order to photosynthesize and grow. So going back to the heat source, the energy from the heat will also radiate onto this rock. Yeah. So that kind of comes into the kind of lithosphere part where your rocks interact with the light from the heat. Yeah. So although looking at it now, yes, it's busy. We can see there's a lot of things going on in there. But there's a lot behind the scenes as well that we don't see with the human eye. For example, how does the heat interact with the rocks? How do the plants interact with the soil and the bacteria within the soil? How do the insects, which feed on the plants and any kind of springtails or, microorganisms, how does the nutrition that they generate from that help the insects? So there's loads of stuff that we don't see with the human eye, but is actually active in this enclosure, because the basis of this design is to be an ecological functioning system where everything kind of interlinks. I did find a baby cricket in here a couple of days ago, which is a sign of crickets breeding and reproducing. So that is evidence there of the system replenishing itself, supporting itself, sustaining itself. Yeah. So, and then overall, that enhances the well-being and health of the leopard gecko that lives in this enclosure. So we can use scientific methods, physics, biology, chemistry, all comes into play in a setup like this. So that is environmental science in a nutshell, guys. If we look more into ecology, ecology is basically the way living things interact with other living things and their environment. So it's how they all kind of interact. Yeah. So environmental science is how nature works. Yeah. So with the physical processes, the biological, the chemical, and all that. Ecology is how the living things, so like the microbacteria, the insects and the plants, how they interact with each other and their environment. Yeah, that's ecology, which is an arm to environmental science. And what was I going to say? So I lost my train of thought now. Ecology. Yeah, so both of those terms, ecology and environmental science, weave into each other. Bioactive, this is where I kind of have some arguments over the use of this term. It's become a cliche term used in the reptile hobby. And people jump on the bioactive bandwagon thinking that they are the gold star level of husbandry. And then further down the line into the bioactive system, they wonder why plants may be dying or the soil isn't right or something like that. So it's kind of like a lack of understanding of how nature works, which is environmental science, not bioactive. So I think there's discrepancies over the use of the term bioactive, and it causes confusion. It's become a commercialized term, and people have jumped on the bandwagon thinking that it's top scale husbandry, when actually it's not, unless you understand how nature and ecology work. And I would rather call it ecological or environmentally friendly rather than bioactive. Bioactive is a term used to describe how compounds, so chemical compounds, affect a living thing. So yes, there is bioactivity going on in here, but it's a tiny arm to the process of ecology and environmental science. And I think this is an area that we need to kind of justify in the reptile hobby, to get clear in people's heads as to what ecology is and what bioactivity is.